Well, let's run the XRF. Yeah, so I'm going to scamper down there and do some scans. Okay.
An XRF scanner just detected silver in sealed soil beneath a 40,000-pound boulder that no treasure hunter in 200 years of searching has ever touched. And that is the least surprising thing Ian Spooner finds today on Lot 8 of Oak Island, because beneath that boulder sits a circular stone structure so deliberate, so precisely engineered, and so carefully hidden that every expert standing over it is saying the same thing.
People are hopeful that once the rock comes up out of the ground, that there'll be an aha moment and you'll see something, i.e. answers to the Oak Island mystery. Here in real time, we're going to get an answer. Is there something underneath it or not?
This predates every known chapter of the Oak Island story. And if it connects to what the team already suspects, it doesn't just add a new chapter to the mystery, it rewrites the entire book. "I've never seen anything like this here," Spooner says. "Now you know what he's looking at. The boulder nobody touched, 200 years of searching, and nobody touched this rock. Not the early treasure hunters who flooded the money pit in the 1800s and lost men doing it. Not the syndicates that drilled and blasted and drained through the 20th century. Not even the Laginas, not in their first years on the island when they were cataloging every significant anomaly they could find. This boulder, sitting in an open field on Lot 8, in plain sight, visible to anyone who walked across this property, appears in none of the historical records. Not a single account, not a note, not a sketch, not a passing reference in any of the thousands of pages of documentation that the Oak Island treasure hunt has generated over 2 centuries of obsessive, meticulous, expensive searching.
We all want answers, but I don't want to accelerate the process in a destructive or invasive way just to get an answer."
That fact alone should have been screaming. 1 week ago, the crew finally moved it. They brought in the equipment, rigged the lines, and shifted all 40,000 pounds of stone. Beneath it, not bedrock, not ordinary glacial till. A carefully arranged ring of smaller stones surrounding a filled-in depression in the earth. Packed soil, a sealed hole. Someone had created this space and then gone to considerable effort to make sure it stayed hidden. A possible shaft. Possibly something more. Whatever that boulder was sitting on top of, it was not an accident of geology. It was a decision. Rick walks the site this morning with archaeologists Fiona Steele and Jack Begley, moving carefully around the perimeter of the exposed feature, while Fiona's team continues the work of pulling back the layers of soil. The excavation has been deliberately slow, one careful pass at a time, with documentation at every stage, because Fiona knows that if they miss something here, they miss it forever. "Look at the progress we've made," she says. Rick steps to the edge of the pit and goes quiet. What he's looking at on the right side of the formation, the way those rocks are structured, the way they bear down on and support the space beneath them, is completely different from what appears on the left side. 2 completely different structural presentations within the same feature. One side built to carry load, the specific kind of load you'd engineer for, if you were creating a foundation or a covering. The other side with no such architecture.
I think it's interesting the way that the rocks are structured on this side, on the right side.
Yep.
And we're not getting the same thing on the other side at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the only side that was actually holding up the boulder.
As if one side had a specific mechanical job to do and the other side simply didn't need to do it. "Why that side and not this side?" Rick asks. It's not a rhetorical question. It's the question, the one that, if it has an answer, could tell them what this feature was actually built to do. Fiona has been turning it over since the moment she noticed it. "I can certainly say that I think it was done a long time ago," she says. "Before the 1700s. Before the 1700s. Before the first documented treasure hunt on this island. Before the money pit legends that have pulled people here across generations even existed. Before the records that define the entire known history of this search begin. Whatever happened on Lot 8, it happened before any of that. Before the story that everyone knows started." What the soil was hiding. Spooner steps onto Lot 8 and fires up the XRF scanner. It's the second time. He's been here with the device, and he already knows the first set of readings were significant enough to bring him back. 3 weeks ago, after the boulder was first moved, Spooner collected soil samples from beneath the exposed feature and ran them through the scanner. What came back stopped him. Elevated lead metal, significantly elevated. Well above anything you'd expect from undisturbed Nova Scotian soil in an area with no known industrial history. Elevated levels of lead metal alone aren't necessarily meaningful, but the presence of that metal in this specific context, in a buried soil layer directly beneath a deliberately placed 40,000-pound stone over a backfilled man-made depression, points to one specific interpretation. When lead concentrations appear alongside combustion markers in sealed underground soil, the most consistent explanation is fire burning underground, not campfire ash from the surface. Controlled, sustained underground fire, the technique used by pre-modern miners to crack rock and ventilate. Sealed tunnels. It was called fire setting, and it was a foundational mining method throughout the medieval world. In the 1300s and 1400s, when you needed to sink a shaft through solid rock and you had no explosives, you built fires at the tunnel face and let the heat do the breaking for you. That's what lead beneath that boulder is suggesting. Someone was driving tunnels here, using medieval mining methods, possibly 6 centuries ago. Today, Spooner runs the scanner again, on fresh material, new soil layer, new sample. He watches the readout as it processes. "It's showing something I didn't see in the other sample," he says. His voice is careful and precise, the register he drops into when the numbers are telling him something significant, and he needs to be sure he's reading it right before he says it out loud. He looks up from the device, which is some silver.
It's showing something that I didn't see in the other sample.
Oh.
Which is some silver.
Yeah.
The word drops into the silence like a stone into still water. Silver. In the soil beneath the boulder. In sealed, undisturbed earth that no known searcher has reached before this team. In 200 years of looking, Fiona goes still. Rick exhales slowly. Spooner looks back at the readout, the way you do when you want to be absolutely certain, when you can't afford to be wrong about something like this. He checks it again. He read it right. A structure that shouldn't exist here. Spooner returns to the pit later that morning as Fiona's team finishes clearing the last of the backfill. What's exposed now stops him at the edge the moment he sees it fully. A tightly packed layer of stones, flat, deliberate, carefully positioned, hidden beneath the backfill and the massive boulder above them. Not scattered by time or shifted by weather, not tumbled into place by glacial movement or natural settlement over centuries. Arranged with precision, placed stone by stone with clear attention to how each piece sits against the ones around it and what the whole structure is meant to do, and framing that central layer in every direction. A circular ring of rocks, a cradle structure, arching around the perimeter of the feature. Something engineered to maintain a specific shape, to define a boundary, to protect whatever the feature contains from the weight and movement of everything stacked above it. Whoever built this understood what they were building and why the geometry mattered. It's not like anything we see on Oak Island, Fiona says, or anything in Nova Scotia, period.
With the Lot 8 feature, I feel absolutely intrigued. It's not like anything we see on Oak Island or anything in Nova Scotia, period. This is motivating us to look through the rocks, look through the structures. We've got to look at everything and make sure that we're not missing anything in this.
She stands back and looks directly at Spooner. "I would like to know if you think I'm crazy," she says, "because I don't feel like this is natural at all." Spooner doesn't pause. "It's not natural. It just can't be, because of the organic matter all around those stones." He moves along the outer edge of the feature, reading the construction as he goes, looking at the relationship between the cradle stones and the flat layer they surround. "I've never seen anything like this here." He straightens up. "I'm blown away."
It just can't be because of the organic matter all around those stones.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anything like this here. And you can also see the cradle of rocks around the top quite nicely now.
Yes.
It's wild. I'm blown away.
Well, you can even see the circular formation of rocks right around the base here.
And then he names it, the thing the feature has to be, given everything the physical evidence is pointing to. The stone is either a marker or something to protect something. A marker placed so someone would know this location, or a seal placed so nothing underneath it would ever be accidentally exposed. Either answer requires the same precondition: a person or a group of people who came to this spot with specific knowledge, built this structure with considerable labor and skill, and left it here knowing exactly what they were leaving behind. and trusting that the 40,000 pounds of stone above it would keep it safe. Fiona is already planning the next phase. "I'm going to be removing this soil, and I would like to see if that pattern continues," she says, looking at the circular ring. "There could be something underneath. Was there something intentionally buried?" She knows the answer. The question she can't yet answer is what? And the physical reality of what they're looking at keeps pulling everyone back to the same uncomfortable implication. Ian Spooner has examined rock formations across this island and across Nova Scotia for years. He's seen what glaciers do, what freeze-thaw cycles do, what centuries of water movement through soil does to stone. He knows every way natural geology can arrange itself. A glacier can deposit a boulder. Ice can push stones into ridges. Water can sort material by weight. But glacial drift does not produce circular cradle structures of tightly fitted flat stones, centered beneath a single capstone boulder. Nature is not that precise. Nature is not that intentional. And nature does not fill in a cylindrical depression with packed soil and then park a 40,000-pound stone on top of the fill line. "We have to look at everything and make sure we're not missing anything," Fiona says. "There could be treasure down there." The next step is to keep removing soil, carefully, systematically, and eventually lift the stones themselves to see what the feature is protecting. But before that happens, every layer gets documented, every stone gets measured and recorded. Because if this site is what it appears to be, every piece of information that can be captured now will matter later. And if it's something even more significant than what they currently suspect, rushing past a detail in the excavation wouldn't just be a mistake, it would be an irreversible one. What it would take. Rick is back at the feature that afternoon with Laird and a researcher named Peter, a man who has spent years studying megalithic constructions across North America and Europe. The massive engineered stone platforms, dolmens, and chamber structures built by ancient cultures who commanded physics and geometry in ways that are easy to underestimate from a modern distance. Rick has been quiet most of the day. When he speaks now, it's the measured voice of someone who handles stone professionally and understands what he's actually looking at. "I've worked with stone for a number of years," he says, standing at the edge of the pit. "I see this and I think, how in the world would you do that? Why would you do that if you're not going to enter something underneath it?" He pauses, looking down into the feature. "And if there is something underneath it, then it's got to be valuable to those persons. This is done by somebody who has sufficient resources that they can pour everything into it in terms of manpower." Peter steps in immediately. The feature in front of him is speaking a language he knows. "I believe strongly that what we're seeing is a European megalithic construction," he says. "You'd need an intimate knowledge of physics and geometry to do this. The kind of engineering knowledge that came to North America with European contact. The indigenous people, I don't think, would have had the technology or the motivation to move a boulder like that. Nor would they bother. It has to be a European construct, and it would take an extraordinary amount of effort, with incredible purpose and intent. That's why, to me, there should be something more here. Maybe there is." Laird studies the location itself, not the feature, but where the feature sits. Open field. No structures nearby. No obvious reference point that would explain why this specific patch of ground warranted this amount of work. "Standing alone," Laird says, "this doesn't make sense. For all intents and purposes, it's in the middle of nowhere."
This doesn't make sense because for all intents and purposes, it's in the middle of nowhere.
Have you ever seen anything like this
No.
before?
No.
And yet, someone poured everything into building here. Enough people to move 40,000 pounds of stone. Enough engineering expertise to design a load-bearing cradle structure beneath a natural boulder capstone. Enough reason, and enough confidence in that reason, to do all of that work and then seal it without leaving a single artifact above the surface that might tell someone what was hidden underneath. Back in 2020, the team uncovered a stone road in the southeast corner of the Oak Island Swamp, a structure dated to at least 500 years old, tentatively linked by researchers to Portuguese exploration of the Atlantic coastline before Columbus. Sitting in that same historical frame, a 14th century silver Portuguese coin believed to have been recovered from the Money Pit area in 1849, suggesting someone with Portuguese connections may have been on this island long before the accepted record of European settlement in Nova Scotia begins. The construction approach of the Lot 8 feature, the scale, the geometric precision, the intentional concealment, belongs to exactly the tradition Peter is describing. Rick notes it plainly. It's almost certainly European. The conversation keeps circling back to scale, not just the engineering challenge of moving a 40,000-pound stone, though that alone is significant, but the planning behind it, the intent embedded in every choice about how this thing was built. You don't arrange a ring of stones in a precise circle by accident. You don't pack a depression with fill and cap it with a natural boulder without understanding what you're creating. You don't do all of that in what is functionally the middle of nowhere, without a reason that justifies the extraordinary expenditure of labor. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Rick asks Peter directly. No, Peter says, no. Whatever this is, it is singular. And whatever it's protecting, the people who built it considered it worth protecting with permanence. This could be changing Nova Scotian history, Rick says. The call. Rick picks up his phone and calls Marty. Marty Legina has been off island, but has been closely following everything coming out of Lot 8. Rick hands the phone to Fiona, who holds the camera over the pit and walks him through it. The exposed stone layer, the circular cradle structure, the evidence of deliberate backfill, the space below that hasn't yet been fully opened. It's entirely rock-lined, Fiona says, absolutely man-placed and extremely intentional. Marty absorbs what he's seeing. When he speaks, he goes directly to the fact that has been sitting in the back of every conversation about this feature since the boulder was first moved. The boulder on Lot 8 doesn't appear to have been manipulated by any of the known earlier searchers, Marty says. There's nothing in the record. He pauses, which means we might be dealing with something that we know is untampered with. We're the first people to look at this thing in a modern sense. 200 years, thousands of people, hundreds of theories, dozens of excavations, and every notable geological feature on this island probed, mapped, and documented. The money pit has been drilled, flooded, re-drilled, and collapsed into itself multiple times. The swamp has been drained and mapped. The stone road has been excavated. The borehole. All chambers have been scanned. Tens of millions of dollars have gone into the ground of this island, chasing a mystery that has killed men and bankrupted syndicates and consumed lifetimes. And this structure, deliberately built, carefully sealed, sitting under 40,000 pounds of stone on a piece of ground called Lot 8, was missed by every single one of them. Not because they were careless, because nothing in the historical record pointed here, because whoever sealed this site either predated the record entirely or made sure they left no trail that would lead anyone back to it. It's just not anything you could make up. What comes next? The excavation is not finished. The stones that form the cradle and the central packed layer haven't been lifted yet. Whatever is beneath them is still sealed, exactly as it has been since the day someone arranged those rocks and positioned that boulder overhead to ensure it stayed that way. Rick stands at the edge of the pit. There is one detail that hasn't been said out loud until now: no artifacts. In a site this deliberately constructed, this carefully engineered, this intentionally sealed, you'd expect to find something at or near the surface. A corroded nail, a pottery fragment, a worn tool, anything that might give the feature a date or a cultural fingerprint or a thread to pull. There is nothing. No material culture at the surface level. Nothing casually dropped, nothing incidentally lost, nothing left behind by the people who built this and walked away from it. That silence is itself a clue. It says either that whoever built this was extremely disciplined about what they left behind, which points to sophistication and intent, or that they built so long ago that any surface artifacts have long since degraded beyond detection. Both possibilities push the timeline in the same direction. That alone is also indicating, Rick says, that either somebody was really trying to hide what they did here, or they really didn't have things to lose, which is giving us implications that this could be really, really old. Really, really old. Before the known searchers. Before the colonial period. Before the records begin. Before the first legend of the money pit was written down. This structure may already have been here, sealed, patient, waiting under its stone. Rick knows what the next step has to be, and he knows it has to be done right. We all want answers, he says, but I don't want to accelerate the process in a destructive or invasive way just to get an answer. Here's what the physical evidence says, taken together as a single picture. a 40,000-pound capstone over a man-made feature, a circular ring of carefully placed smaller stones beneath it, a tightly packed flat stone layer below that, surrounding soil with elevated lead pointing to underground fire setting, and silver in sealed, undisturbed earth that no known searcher has reached before. The XRF doesn't lie. Stones don't arrange themselves into circles. Lead doesn't concentrate in undisturbed, buried soil without a source. Silver doesn't appear in sealed, untouched earth for no reason. Somebody built this. Somebody sealed it. And for the first time in 2 centuries of hunting this island, the team standing over it may genuinely be the first eyes on it since the day it was covered.